from the, what do you call it, political election. And at that point, between the good, honest government and very dedicated citizens and the developers in later years that partnered with the government and the citizens, Overland Park has been extremely fortunate and grown because of that.
Oh,
We were looking for.
Those of you that are clear in the back that couldn't hear so well, you want to move up here to the tables? Anybody wants to move up here up front, there's chairs now. In case you don't know it, Ann Ogden is a Porter grandchild from that Porter farm he was talking about, that where Prairie Village was built.
You missed one point. You missed one point.
What did I miss?
Who was the first mayor?
Roy Owen.
Roy Owen, he talked about him.
Yeah, oh, I'm on, okay. Yeah, Roy Owen was the old township board chairman that became the first mayor when it changed from a township board to a city of first class. And now, you know, it was a smaller community then, but most cities kind of still come down. Somewhat small town when everyone who really are the ones who decide things. Roy worked with retired Swift and Company executive. One of his co-workers there and a friend of his was Ivy Bond, whom I knew Ivy because he was active in the Mission Baptist Church. Ivy had a son, Dick Bond, who Roy appointed as the first city attorney for the city of Overland Park. Dick and I actually were in high school, in the same class in high school, and played in the school bands together. So I say those are, and that's the way those things happen. We may not always know why they happen. I told Dennis Garrett, I would recommend Dennis's book and the other Historical Society book. I haven't read this one. They tell you what happened. They give you dates and some things that I can't. I can maybe do better on telling you why it happened. And some things like Dick's appointment. Dick was a very accomplished individual. But, well, moving on then, I would say in 1965 when I ran for re-election, Don Elliott was my opponent. And I remembered about when the city was formed from the township, the Board of County Commissioners had decided the city, what would be Overland Park, what would be Leewood, and what would be Mission and Merriam and Prairie Village. And that the Cherry Hills Association, while Don Elliott was president of the Homes Association, had preferred or argued that they wanted to be in Leewood. So I went out to the county commissioner's office and asked the secretary, and I'd worked there for 5 years and not been gone too long. You know, so I went in and went back there and hauled out the books on Mission Urban Township and the dissolution of the township. And among the things I found as I went through it was a telegram, the old-fashioned type telegram to the Board of County Commissioners that said, let's see, I can repeat almost verbatim, I think it was Cherry Hills homeowners prefer Leewood. Cherry Hills wants no part of Overland Park, stop. Don Elliott, president of the Cherry Hills Homes Association, and that was my opponent. Now I was saying also in that second election at that time, by then I had the support generally of the downtown community, the merchants in that area, based on the first couple of years, and that was a very close election. I won the 29 votes, and I always say it was closer than it sounds, because the votes were very slow coming in, and as usual, the north areas were more supportive of me and Democrats, but I was carrying, but not enough, and it got to where I was behind by about 125 votes or so, and we had one precinct out, which was my own precinct, and they were voting at the King Louis bowling alley, and we had all the other returns. We didn't have them from there, and an hour or so goes by, And everybody was going out to see what was going on, and as one of the election board workers told me, they said they knew it was, their vote was critical, so they went back and recounted them to be sure they had it right. And I carried that precinct by about 200 votes and won by 28 or 29 votes. Now, so that tells you what you can do with the solid support of the business community and the Chamber of Commerce and most of those types sometimes. Very easier to run against them than run with them, maybe. But, so then I was a Democratic mayor with 10 Republican council members. We got some things done, we disagreed on some things. One of the things we did agree on was my proposal that we petition the county commissioners to annex into Overland Park everything from 107th Street South to 135th Street between the Lenexa city limit on the west and the Leawood city limit on the east. We had a unanimous vote on that. One of the things we could agree on. I said, well, it's kind of like, it's always good politics if you have problems at home and internally get an enemy that you can pick on or start a war or something. And that's kind of why we could agree on that. We had a great hearing. They ridiculed us. They laughed at us. I said it was the most reasonable thing we had ever done, but we didn't get very far with it. But over the years, we were successful over Overland Park in expanding their boundaries. I was followed by Stuart Enoch, good friend. He became a good friend, he and his wife. And I always said that Overland Park's manifest destiny was the county line, or maybe Lewisburg. And Stuart said it should be the Gulf Coast. And we do have, even though I was ridiculed for suggesting 135th Street, they say practically that, well, ridicule's the best word, that would never happen. But it did, of course, as I told them. I said, next 20 years, it's going to happen, and we're going to have to build the streets and the infrastructure. We're going to have to plan for it. It makes it no sense not to have it in Overland Park. Now our southern boundary is approximately the county line. Some might know it, which is like a 200. Is it still 199? And I think the county line may be a
215?
a little bit south of that.
215.
Yeah, there was, I sent clippings to Stuart Enoch of a big story on a big zoning battle in Overland Park at 199th and Mission Road. And then another one recently, just a few weeks ago, there was in the home section of the Star, there was a story about a new subdivision, the fastest developing subdivision in Overland Park, that started with, it was located in the heart of Overland Park at 167 and Ridgeview, I believe it was. You go down 69 Highway to 169th and turn west. That was the heart of Overland Park. Stuart would love it. He's in Phoenix.
That was before it started beating, though.
Pardon?
That was before the heart started beating, right?
Yeah, and I live north of the Brook Ridge Country Club, and right now there's this big battle over the redevelopment of the country club going on, of which I've gotten too involved in more than I ever intended to. But the developer thinks that area needs redeveloping. That's area adjacent to the Wide Cliff subdivision, the Pinehurst Estate subdivision. And those areas are not the areas of Overland Park that may need assistance. Economic development is one of the, well, let's see, I guess I go back to Eisenhower warned of the political, military, industrial complex. I think we need somebody today to warn of the eco-development political complex. It is good, we have to have the economic development, we need to be for it, but I don't think there's a real reasonable discussion of what it is. The developer of the Brook Ridge, in order to get all these tax incentives he wants, which is $600 million, and a part of that it will be sales tax collected that will come collected by the city and state and then paid over to the developer to pay for the development. I don't think now that may be okay, and there's other people that will make good arguments for it, but let's recognize what it is and let's have more discussion of it. It's true of every city, and to get those economic development incentives, he has to represent, and he has in his application, that but for those incentives, the development or redevelopment would not occur. Now, every city in the state has that same standard, and every one of these developments meets that standard, that gets these incentives, meets that standard of being, of having to have the incentives or it can't be developed. Well, I've always said most cities really, the main requirement for getting the tax benefits and incentives is you've got to ask for them. And, that's the first requirement.
They're perfectly willing to do that, aren't they?
Yes, yeah, they are. They've been good developers, you know, one of them was the Metcalf South, Frank Morgan. I'd say a few things about Frank Morgan, despite his later legal problems, was one you could trust. If he told you he was going to do something, he would do it. He knew what he was doing, had the capability of doing it. Another thing I mentioned on Metcalf South is the architect on that was Bill Wilson of Barlow and Wilson, who did that. That was the first one he did for that group, and went on to do a series of them. He thought Metcalf South was his best for various reasons, but and they developed a chain of those. And Bill was chairman of the Overland Park Planning Commission for a period of time. Good thinker, good architect, and good thinker, as they need to be from a social standpoint. The other thing I would say about Metcalf South, you say, why is it there? Well, I remember sitting down with Frank Morgan, him bringing in his studies from groups that came in and reviewed the area and showed him how this was the number one or in top three market location in the nation for it. They draw their circle around it and look at the income and the population. That unfortunately changes. And so the Metcalf South has to change, it does the other shopping center. The other things I would say about Metcalf South, it was really kind of a tough zoning cell. The old downtown area had a history of opposing such projects and development. It is immediately adjacent to single-family residences on the east, separated, the parking lot separated only by a landscape berm. When they added the air land to the south for the Metcalf, or for the Sears store, it became more controversial. But it's been, of course, very, very successful. Oak Park, I do want to go back to the Oak Park area, and and I think it's explained by some dates. The J.C. Nichols Company had developed a small shopping center on the southeast corner of 95th and Knoll. They applied for that rezoning in early 1964. On March the 30th, the Planning Commission recommended denial. December 7th, 1964, following immediately after that, the City Council affirmed the denial again back in March and April of 1964. That was in the spring of 64. On December the 7th, 1964, the Overland Park City Council, they filed a second application. The Overland Park City Council approved the annexation of it, or approved the rezoning of it. Now, two things happened. I received a call one day from Don Pikes after the denial, said he thought this was a good time for us to start a diplomatic initiative with the J.C. Nichols Company. And so we made our pilgrimages to the plaza to meet with Ansel Mitchell and discuss his rezoning and the city of Overland Park's desire to annex the Oak Park area. Ansel Mitchell, finally the first application for rezoning was for what we call a straight, well, it was for non-planned zoning, a C3 and some residential, commercial, and some apartment zoning, but not restricted to a plan presented. I ended up telling Ansel, well, and he explained to us, he said that, I thought we needed plan zoning, maybe we get it approved. They never agreed to plan, he said, not even in Kansas City, Missouri. He said the Nichols Company has higher standards than any of the city, so why should we agree to go by their standards? So it was, anyway, it was denied in March of 30th, 1964. Rezoned by the city council with a new application in December the 7th, 1964. And on January the 4th, 1965, the Nichols Company petitioned for annexation of it to Overland Park, and Overland Park annexed it on January the 26th, 1965. So some might suspect, say it was just a deal made. Well, it was, but it was, we weren't secretive about our discussions with them, and they did make the concession needed to get approval of the 95th and all. And that probably is the most significant, the annexation thing that happened during my tenure in office. Maybe number one was the selection of Donald Pipes as city manager. He was here 30-some years until 1999. The other was the annexation of Oak Park and the ultimate development of the Oak Park Mall and the collection of the sales tax on it, which has enabled Overland Park to be have the lowest mill levy of any city in the state of Kansas, of any first-class city in the state of Kansas, and that's true today. That's much of the key to the financing of the city. I should say just a bit more about Don Pipes. Don pioneered what was known as the low-profile style of management. You didn't see his name out front, but you knew he was behind everything. He was the one that was feeding the information to me, making the suggestions to me, or to the later mayors. Ben Craig has called him the most important person that you've never heard of. Well, that's true. Don did great things. That was his leadership in so many areas. His selection of personnel was incredibly good. He selected some great early department heads and directors for the city, including Dennis Garrett, who has a book that is worth reading because if Dennis did it, it was done well. I remember Dennis telling us after the Sprint Center relocation was announced and approved, and they said, someone asked him what you need to do. He says, start building streets as damn fast as we can. And Dennis was very, very solid, very good about it. Don's was an annexation hawk, even more maybe than Dewar and I. He loved annexations and planned them. As in the 1970s when we had the series of annexations that took the city far to the south. There were, at that time, annexations had to meet certain criteria to be done without consent or approval of the county commissioner. They had to be adjacent to the city and within or mainly within the city, and or less than, not more than 5 acres, or platted land, or about 7 or 8 conditions there. And so to do that, first, Don had called me and wanted the name of an attorney that trusted in Wyandotte County, which after a while I did with him. And that he had that attorney contact a title company in Wyandotte County to get accurate title information so no one would suspect what Overland Park was up to. And then it culminated in the governing body meeting having a series of 8 separate annexation ordinances, each passed one night, published the next morning, another one the next night, and when it ended up before the Supreme Court a couple of years later, the Supreme Court said that the governing body had met for the 8th consecutive night and on the, excepting for Sunday. And on Sunday, they took a rest from their labors and took that Sunday night off. But that's how much of the area to the south was annexed. Don loved the annexation wars, and so he planned them the way the Normandy invasion was planned. I think that I ought to just stop there and see if you've got some questions. I've got a lot of other interesting things we can talk about, but who wants to share this, Brad? Anyone got questions?
I have a comment.
Yes, comments too. Those are even more important, and corrections are equally important. I begin to worry about false memories.
Our planning commission and all this crap, White Castle couldn't be white, Red Roof Inn couldn't have a red roof, and where the hell did those 150-foot poles at 150 knoll, or 107th and knoll, where did those sneak in?
That's a later council.
I've had the same thing. I told Mayor Gerlach here a few weeks ago when he was talking about after his speech to the State of the City where he talked about that development. And across from it is going to be the, Fly something or other, the strange looking building that you can go up on the elevator and dive off and fly down onto the currents.
Yeah.
I told him I don't know, I'm happy about those, but I don't know that the pro golf deal or the fly me are the things I want to see to be known for. It's rather strange. And the other, I always use those kind of things, regulations, say, yeah, it's the right-wing conservative, maybe would say Republican, but it's right-wing conservative politicians that want to tell you what color to paint your house and things like that, you know. But it's an interesting observation. I think it's a little strange now. It may be a great entertainment. You know, the Brookridge subsidies are based on in part on it being declared a TIF district for qualifying for star bonds as a major tourism area. They have a consultant's report that's filed with the city and state saying out why it qualifies as that. And one of the things they say, because immediately adjacent to it on the west is the Legends tourism area. That's 103rd and strange that they would say that. Equally strange that no one's caught it and corrected or commented on it.
Legends is a long ways away.
Yeah.
Long way
That's in
Wyandotte County.
yes. That's the way the study refers to it. Either the consultants from Buffalo, New York had never visited the area, and/or the developer has never read the report. That hurts credibility with me.
Sure does. Sure does. Now, let me just say one thing. If I recall,
Use the microphone. People can't hear.
okay, if I recall, Marvin is the one that really organized the city hall, all the way from, I guess, creating the various departments and obviously pushing for the city manager, etc. So we appreciate that very much, Marvin, and at that point, I guess you were probably part of the group that pushed for it to be nonpartisan also, and as such, that's why we've been very fortunate to have good, honest government, and of course been very, very fortunate to have the dedicated citizens we've had, and that's what's made Overland Park.
Yeah, I would give Don Pipes full credit for the organization of it and for being an individual of great integrity and great foresight. So you didn't hear much about it, but so many things he took the lead in. Now he would turn around and give me or the later mayors the credit for it. He would think it was a failure on his part if the mayors didn't get the credit for it, but he was one. But we did accomplish much in those areas with his leadership. Just to mention a few things real quick, I think I have them here. When I was elected, there was not a curbed and gutter street from Metcalf to Antioch. We built those because we learned things were controversial, like widening 79th Street west of Antioch. But we were successful in that. There was not a park in Overland Park at the time I was elected. We did develop then the Youngs Lake Park, which Roy Owen had started. We did not have a city hall. We met in the building to the south here during the time I was mayor. 2 prior bond issues for city hall had failed. We planned another bond issue which passed. That site again had been acquired by Roy Owen previously. I always say I got the bond issue passed. Dewar cut the ribbon. I got the Metcalf zoning approved. Dewar cut the ribbon. But he is a good guy and a good friend. After the Metcalf South zoning, which there had been a lot of opposition to from the so-called downtown merchants, I proposed what became commonly known as the Downtown Rescue Plan, and there were 3 elements to it. The first one was to acquire some sites for parking lots. We acquired 3 lots and made them into parking lots. One of them is the lot where the clock tower is today. Another one was over on 81st Street, one down on Consul Street. A second part of the plan was streets improvements, including building a curbed and gutter street for 79th Street from Santa Fe west to Antioch, Consul Street from 79th Street north to 75th Street, and Floyd Street and Marty Street between 80th Street and Metcalf. We were able to get that zoning. The kind of just 2 or 3 little kind of fun things. And
I want to tell you something. You know, Marvin, there were a lot of attorneys up over our store and over John Francis, and a lot of business went on upstairs in a room called the gin room. And one of the people that had an office up there, he rented extra space so they could have this gin room, and there was a permanent gin game going on at all times. True? Is that not true? And I think a lot of county business was conducted in that gin room.
County business, city business.
City business, any kind of business.
Monkey business.
You remember that, don't you?
it was there before I was there.
Yes, it was. It was there from the time the building was built, which our store was there, when the building was built.
Roy Owen took delight in when we were having this battle with the county over where the lines for Overland Park and Prairie Village and such would be, and the county had given a lot of it to those cities. And Roy, with delight, tells about how he called and broke up the gin game, told them, "Get out here, we need you to come out and lobby the commissioners." We had one county commissioner, Carl Standiford, who'd been mayor of Fairway, who was always in favor.
Wait a minute. There we go.
Carl would always vote in favor of the cities. We had Ken Hurd from Shawnee, who would vote in favor of the Democrats. He was a friend of mine, and some of us, and he would vote in favor of Overland Park. And then we had Herman Higgins of Gardner, who would go back and forth. He earned the nickname from the newspapers that identified him as Vacillating Herman, because he would be one way in the afternoon, then the Overland Park people would come out and yell at him, and he would be the other way. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Of course, we were considerably younger and smaller then, but that was kind of a fun time for people in downtown Overland Park. And him saying that the merchants opposed Metcalf South was pretty true, because we didn't have we were not a one-owner area, and we couldn't beautify or have a common area maintenance that the shopping centers were going to have, and our curbs and our gutters were getting horrible. There was a hole in the gutter in front of our store that you could lose a tire in, and we couldn't get anybody to fix it. So you know what we did later on, this was in the late 80s, we formed a business improvement district and we taxed ourselves. But we also got taxed for these parking lots. The merchants had to pay a tax for these parking lots. Then it went off afterwards, but it was called a business tax. It was a business license tax. And so the parking lots that exist in downtown Overland Park to this day were paid for by the merchants. Then when we got the business improvement district and got the city to kick in on that after we taxed ourselves, that's how Overland Park got beautified and got to compete with the shopping centers, because there was no way to compete with them otherwise. Here you go.
Okay, I'll just make 3 or 4 points and then let's go back to any questions. Some things that happened that you might not know might be is that of the more than half of the years that the city of Overland Park has been in existence, it's had a mayor that went to a one-room country school and was the only one in the class for the first 3 years. I was from northeastern Missouri, and Ed was from southwestern Kansas, but both of us went to the one-room country schools. Second, some of you may remember, we did have a Miss America from Overland Park, Debbie Bryan, in 1964. 64, maybe 65. Check the dates. I have no trouble with those. We also had a tornado in Overland Park, 65 or 66 wasn't there. You learn from all of these things from the tornado. I'd been in the courthouse a few years before, and the office, they organized a civil defense department below me with Leighton Spadoni and then Ms. Blair as the director. And it was in the sub-basement, we called it then. And I had my office above Susie's here when that tornado struck, and someone came upstairs and said, "Hey, you haven't seen a tornado, look out your window." Yes, and I looked out the window and it looked like it was directly in line with the house where I lived then. And I started trying to call her wife, who was just a bit earlier, and told me she was laying down with the babies after lunch to take a nap. And I couldn't get a dial tone, and my secretary said, "Better drive out there." And I said, "Sure, I can call quicker and drive out there." And we're watching it out the big window in the front of the office there, and finally got through to her. And as I'm talking to her to tell her to go across the street to our neighbors that had a basement, I saw it going up in the air. And then the sirens went off. After that, I read